I'm Rick Lewis with Phenom Hoop Report. On today's segment of Coach's Corner, I have a very special guest in Shammond Williams. Welcome, Coach.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. For a lot of the people out there, I did an announcement that you're going to be coming on and helping out with Phenom Hoop Report with being a scout analysis for the upstate South Carolina area, and it's gotten a tremendous amount of respect and reviews. So I just want to say thank you for your participation and your future support with Phenom. But for a lot of people out there, they know that you played at UNC. You were a star at UNC. You played in the NBA, and also you went to 3 Final Fours. But you have a very interesting story to tell along the way that I think really resonates with a lot of young players today.
Right.
Now, you were born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina. You went to Southside High School. In 1993, as a junior, Southside won the state championship in the 2A. But you were more of a role player your junior year. And then your senior year, you also won the state championship again, but this time it was a 3A. And you said in high school you played behind Merle Code a lot. Talk about your high school career as a junior and also as a senior at Southside.
Yes, sir. Well, I was on a great basketball team at Southside High School. The 91-92 team, we were able to win the state championship, and we had a great basketball team. Played, like I said before, my whole life I played behind Merle Code, who's one of my close friends. And so once he graduated from high school to go to Fork Union himself, it was an opportunity for me to move into that starting position. And in the state of South Carolina, they moved us up to 3A. Where it would be more difficult in some regard in most people's eyes. But, I continue to have a great supporting cast. Actually, I'm saying supporting cast. I was actually part of the supporting cast in all actuality. So it was great just understanding how to play a role. And, we finished that year 30-2. We lost in the state championship, actually in 3A against Eau Claire. But we had guys on that basketball team my senior year. We had 4 guys that ended up playing Division I basketball and 2 guys that played Division II basketball. One being Mike Minifield, who played at St. John's University. The greatest thing that ever happened to me in all actuality was being in a position where I had to wait my turn.
Right.
And understanding to be a part of something bigger than yourself, and understand that even though I wasn't playing a lot of minutes, I was still part of a team, and my role was important, whatever that role may be. And I think a lot of that would be important to today's kid because everybody wants to be the focal point, but nobody really wants to be part of a supporting cast or be an individual that's willing to wait their turn. And for myself, when I left Southside High School and graduated in 93, I had no scholarship offers to go to college. And so with that being said, I needed an avenue to help me, put myself in a position that I could be a college attendee. And a man by the name of Dan Peterson, who was my godfather to this day, he gave me an opportunity to go to Fork Union Military to play for Fletcher Everett. And from the grace of God and some hard work, I went from a kid that was not recruited or even thought of. I wasn't even all-state in the state of South Carolina to being, labeled the best point guard in prep school.
Well, when you graduated from Southside in 1993, you had no Division I offers. You had no D2 offers. I think you said earlier to me that the only opportunity you had to play at the next level was from North Greenville Community College.
Yes.
So, every kid growing up wants to play at the highest level. So for you as a person, as a player, what was it like knowing that you finished your senior year and you, at that point in time, you had no offers? What was it like for you at that time?
I would say, it was an interesting time because you didn't know what your future held. I was really a great musician though, and and I was considered one of the best in the state of South Carolina percussionist. And so I did have avenues that I could have pursued as a musician
Right.
at some universities, but that wasn't what I was interested in at that time. I think the most important thing for me at that time was proving people that I was capable and I did belong. And that's been my story my whole life, just trying to prove to people that I am better than what they think that I am. And so at that time, I think that was my focus more than anything else. I just wanted an opportunity to prove myself, where I didn't feel like it was maybe a biased environment or you just wanted an opportunity.
Right.
And so, I'm very thankful to Fork Union Military Academy and Coach Eric, who, I love a great deal because, he thought that I could be an intricate part of that season's team. And he understood how bad I wanted an opportunity.
Right.
And so Fork Union Military Academy, changed my life in a big way.
Well, Coach, you went from graduating at Southside to having no offers. You get an opportunity to go to Fork Union. And then at Fork Union, you end up being the #1 point guard at the prep school level. In your wildest dreams, did you think the opportunity going to Fork Union would ever elevate you to a situation where you were being recruited by the Blue Bloods and end up going to UNC?
No, sir. No, sir. And the great thing about it is a lot of my teammates at Fork Union, when you talk about the story, it seems so surreal, but a lot of my teammates understood that, when we were first there, first month, we were having hypothetical conversations. What if what if Todd Bozeman called you from California? What would you do? What if Coach John Thompson called you? What would you do? Would you commit? You'd be like, yeah, I commit immediately. So, and there were guys there that were being heavily recruited. I played with DeMarco Johnson at Fork Union, who's outstanding basketball player in person. And so, DeMarco was being recruited heavily at that time. James Pelham from Petersburg, Virginia, and a lot of others. And so, for me, it was just, hey, it was a hypothetical thought process. And, I always tell people, be careful what you wish for when you pray, because that's what I would do every night, when we would finish study hall. You couldn't get up from your desk. You have to continue studying. You couldn't read magazines. The only thing you could read, if it wasn't just your things that you were studying, was your Bible. And so I would just read my Bible once I finished. And every night I would just pray and ask God, if you, for scholarship offer to go to college, just that was my prayer every night. And so I always tell people, be careful what you pray for, because, that prayer turned into an environment that it became a little difficult for me, because weeks later, I was getting those college coaches coming in and calling and offering me scholarships and coming to visit me. And in all actuality, it became such an array that it was difficult on me, mentally as well as physically.
Well, your prayers were answered, Coach.
Yes.
You were being recruited at the highest level with all the Blue Bloods, but what made you decide to go to UNC?
A lot of people ask me this question, and it it sounds, it's like, well, Shammond, I can't believe it, but it's the honest to God's truth. Coach Smith came to see me at Fork Union. And while I was playing on the court, my coach pulled me off the court and he said, Coach Smith wants to visit with you after we finish practice. And so at that time, I thought it was like the Coach Smith that was at Virginia Tech. And I was like, well, Coach Smith from Virginia Tech? He was like, no, Coach Smith from North Carolina. I didn't grow up a North Carolina fan. I had no idea who Dean Smith was. So it didn't really resonate to me, North Carolina, Dean Smith. But he also told me that Pitino wanted to meet with me as well after I met with Coach Smith. Now, I knew who Rick Pitino was because I was born in New York and have a New York background and stuff like that. I knew who he was. So that kind of resonated to me. But Coach Smith did not resonate to me. And so after practice finished, I went into Coach's office, and Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge came in. And Coach Smith said to me, he said he had heard about me, and this is his first time coming to see me. And, you know, he said to me, like, he usually does not do this often, but he would offer me a scholarship immediately. And I told him, thank you. I appreciate it. I told him, you have to go to Greenville to see my mother. And, you know, that was the gist of it. And then Pitino came in and he offered me a scholarship as well and told me that I would, you know, I would start. You know, Coach Smith told me if I came to Carolina, I would play. But Pitino told me that I would start. And he told me some other guys that he was recruiting as well and so on and so forth. And so, you know, at the same time, the same evening, I got a scholarship offer from the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country. And so a lot of my teammates were like, wow, you know, they were asking me about Dean Smith. And I couldn't, you know, it didn't resonate to me, North Carolina basketball, because I grew up a Clemson fan. So I knew nothing of North Carolina. I didn't know the magnitude of having Dean Smith offer you a scholarship. And at the time, I was really sold on going to the University of South Carolina because Eddie Fogler had just gotten the job. And he was the first coach that really had come into the state of South Carolina that showed interest in me immediately, he and Rick Callahan. And so my mindset, it was like, you know, October was coming around and Midnight Madness and those types of things. And so, you know, my first official visit, you know, I had the opportunity to go to North Carolina, Kentucky. I had a chance to go to a lot of other places as well. I chose to go to South Carolina, you know, because Eddie Fogler showed interest in me. You know, I just wanted somebody to think that I was okay. And he was the first person to kind of do that. And so, in all actuality, Mr. Lewis, I went to in 1993, I went to the Alabama University of South Carolina football game. I was there that weekend. And South Carolina ended up beating Alabama. And that Sunday morning, I actually committed to the University of South Carolina. Wow. And once I committed, you know, Coach Fogler was happy, Callahan and everybody was happy. But my mother and Coach Peterson, they didn't show the exuberance that everybody else did. So once, before I left to go back to Fort Union, my mom was telling me, you're not going to South Carolina. You're not going. I'm like, yes, I am, you know. And so that became a little tug of war within my family. And then maybe 2 weeks later, Eddie Fogler came to Fort Union, and he said to me, Shammond, I had a chance to play for the best, and I think you should as well. Wow. And so I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, you know, I played for the best, and you should too. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? And he was like, I think you should go to North Carolina. And so I said to him, I said, are you saying you don't want me to come to South Carolina? He was like, I think you should go to North Carolina. So I told him, I said, my mother must have got to you. I said, don't worry about that. I got all that under control. Don't worry about that. He was like, no, I played for Dean Smith, so I think you should as well.
Wow.
And so I was like, no, if you don't want me to come to South Carolina, I'm not going to North Carolina. I'm going to go to Kentucky. And he was like, no, you can't go to Kentucky. You can't go to Kentucky. But to make a long story short, the process of elimination from my mother and Coach P, you know, I ended up probably having to go to North Carolina. You know, it wasn't – I can't say that it was just a choice. I said, I'm going to go to North Carolina. It was kind of like a process of elimination. Nobody else wanting to recruit me in that regard. And I ended up in North Carolina. So, you know, always listen to your mother.
I was getting ready to say, Mama's always right.
Yeah, always listen to your mother.
Well, you know, Coach Smith, when he came to, you know, to talk to you, and he mentioned to you, you would have the opportunity to play. He didn't guarantee you a starting position. In the 1994-1995 season, as a freshman, UNC goes to the Final Four. And you play, you said, an average of 3 minutes. What was it like, the positives and the negatives, going to the Final Four, but only playing 3 minutes a game?
Well, like I said before, my whole lifestyle has been predicated on proving things to people. And so when I got to North Carolina, I knew Jeff. Once I went on my visit and I started putting things together, because I wasn't really, I wasn't basketball savvy. I knew Jeff and I knew Jerry because we had played against each other at AAU. And so, the more I began to look at it, I was like, this really wasn't a good decision because Jeff and I play the same position. And so I'm probably going to play behind Jeff.
Right.
And I've been trying to avoid that because I've been playing behind Merle Colt my whole life. So, getting to North Carolina and playing those 3 minutes, it was difficult because I felt like I deserved more minutes. But at that time, Coach played Pierce Landry in front of me and, Dante Calabria and those guys, which they probably deserved it because they were upperclassmen in that regard. But, I continued to work and I continued to, fight for my opportunities. And, there were games I would get to play a little bit more than 3 minutes and so on and so forth. But I knew that I needed to prove to people that I was better than that. Because you got to think, in South Carolina, I was a kid that wasn't all-state. I didn't make the North-South game. Then you hear me sign to North Carolina. There were a lot of people that were second-guessing my decision and my ability. And so me not playing as much as I felt like I needed to kind of felt, fed into that stereotype and fed into, the thought process of I should have never gone to North Carolina. And so, there were things that I needed to do within myself to prove to everyone that I was more than capable of playing there.
Now, your sophomore year, you had more playing time, significant minutes there. And, of course, that season, UNC got upset in the second round of Texas Tech. I'm sure your sophomore season, you got more playing time, but you had to have a lot of disappointment because the year before you went to the Final Four. So what was it like, your sophomore season, losing in the second round?
Well, the thing about it was there's a lot of ebbs and flow within the season. You look at it from a team perspective as well as you look at it from a personal perspective as well. From a team perspective, we weren't winning games as much as we did the previous year with Jerry and Rasheed leaving to go to the NBA and Donald leaving as well. But, on a personal note, Coach Smith had asked me to play the off-guard position, which I was a little apprehensive at the beginning because of my ability to shoot the basketball and score. And, I felt like that was a way of, him just, moving me because I wasn't going to get to play much or, I didn't look at it from a team perspective as much first as opposed to maybe a way of matriculating me out of the system. And so, but once I began playing off the ball, Coach Smith began giving me more opportunity to play a role. So I would play off the ball and then I would play on the ball. And then in all actuality, the thing that I was most apprehensive about really made me the best pro that I could be, because now I could play two positions, which I had never played. Nobody had ever played Merle Colt and I together on the court. I've always just played behind it. And so it allowed me to learn another position, and it showed people that I was capable and I was a diverse player. Not only could I lead a team, I could also play off the ball and score the basketball as well. And so, I was looked upon more as a three-point shooter and scorer my sophomore year, which allowed me to progress as a basketball player. So I was fulfilling being able to show people that I belonged, but in that regard also, we weren't winning as many games or, like you said before, getting to the Final Four. And so, I was appreciative of the opportunity and I was working toward that. But, I did want my game to have an impact that could help the team possibly win a national championship as well.
Well, your junior season, it was sort of a coming out party for Shammond Williams, but you were playing with nice cast of characters too. You had Antoine Jameson and Vince Carter. Now that
Yes.
season was very really unusual because you guys started out 0-3 in ACC. So everybody
Right.
was going, "Oh, what's wrong with UNC? They're 0-3." But you
Right.
guys turned it around. You went back to the Final Four, but along the way, you were named the ACC tournament MVP. You had an unbelievable ACC tournament run. In addition to that, you were the MVP of the Eastern Regionals, and you got back to the Final Four. So here you are as a junior, 2 out of the first 3 years at UNC, you're in the Final Four.
Yes. Yes. Now, my junior year was going into my junior year. I had a conversation with Coach Smith. I was in the gym working out, which people will tell you that's where I lived, in the gym. And Coach Smith came to me while I was working out, and it's the first conversation we've ever had of this magnitude that I know of. He walked up. He said, "Shammond, I want to talk to you for a minute." And he began telling me the things that I needed to work on because there'll be a lot of place upon my shoulders this following year. And he also told me I needed to possibly think about basketball being a profession for me. And that's the first time he had ever talked to me about it in that regard. And for me, that's the first time I ever thought about it. I never had aspirations on playing basketball as a professional. I wanted to work on Wall Street, get my economics degree from North Carolina and work on Wall Street. So that was my focus, as well as just proving people that I belonged.
Right.
And that was the magnitude of it for me. And so with Coach Smith saying that to me, it didn't change who I was as an individual. It didn't change my work ethic because I worked hard anyway. But it said that he believed in me. And then going into my junior year with Jeff leaving and going to the NBA, I would be the starting point guard with Ed Cota coming in as well. And so, the one thing that I did know, and a lot of people may have not known about me, is I've been a point guard my whole life, and I've always won. And so, I took that serious. I knew that most people would think that the lacking position for the University of North Carolina would probably be the point guard position, especially when you have Antoine Jameson, you have Vince Carter, and you had Adamola, and then Mac Tar was Mac Tar would be playing that year for us as well. Serge Zwicker, I was pretty much the weak link that most people was going to think, and so, it was something that really drove me to, like I said, to prove people that I wasn't going to be the weak link, and I could most definitely lead this basketball team to greatness. And throughout that year, even though we had that 0-3 start, as a team we came together in Virginia locker room. One of our teammates, Webb Tyndall, from Greenville, North Carolina, he made the statement, when the fingers are spread apart, the hand is no good, but when you put the fingers together, you can really pack a punch. And that really resonated with us as a team, and we took off from there. And then, my mentality was, I cannot let this thing fail on my watch.
Right.
And so, I was blessed to have a good ACC regular season, and then in the ACC tournament, it was important to get the championship, and I was blessed to do something that many aren't, many great players aren't able to do, and that's to be named the ACC MVP. And that's the one thing that I can take to my grave, and my children can celebrate is Daddy was a nobody, but the ACC thought that he
You
was the
were
best
always proving people wrong, Coach.
player. Yeah, yes, sir.
Well, Coach, your senior season to start in 1997. Now, the 1997-1998 season, you guys went back to the Final Four. So as a player at UNC, 3 out of the 4 years, you went to the Final Four, which is pretty impressive. But 1997 really shocked the basketball world. At the beginning of the season, Dean Smith announced his retirement. He did it
Yes,
on the
sir.
first day of practice.
Right.
What was it like as a player when you heard the news?
It was it was it was a difficult thing to hear because one of the things that in my recruiting was, Rick Pitino wouldn't be at Kentucky for my whole career. And so Coach Smith had told me, I would be there your whole career. And, that's one thing Coach Smith and I had. We had a great relationship. And so, there was a lot of opportunities presented to me because of the season that I had. You're the ACC MVP. You're the Eastern Regional MVP. There's a lot of things that, come your way, especially when you start talking about being a professional, being able to go to the NBA draft and things like that. So, for me, I was mostly focused on coming back when I made the decision, hey, I'm coming back. I'm coming back for one reason. I'm coming back to win it. That's the only reason I'm coming back. I had experienced everything else. I experienced the Final Fours, two of them.
Right.
And so, my thing was, what can I do to win this national championship? And some of my, my teammates, they were having the same discussions and same thought process as well. And so at the beginning of our season is we run a 12-minute run. 12-minute run, and then we run the mile run. It's the start of the season. And after the mile run, Coach Smith asked us, Mactar and I, who were the captains, did we want to go and shower or did we want to have a meeting immediately? And we didn't know what the meeting was about, so we was like, Coach, let's just have a meeting. And we went to the meeting, and while, Coach Smith came up to the front of the team, and he made the announcement. He said, I'll be retiring from coaching. And so in my head, I remember vividly looking at Brendan Haywood and telling him, I said, man, I feel sorry for you, because he was a freshman. So in my mind, I was thinking he was leaving at the end of the season.
Right.
So that, I called me, like, look at Brendan, and said, man, I'm sorry about, and Coach Smith was, really apprehensive about it. But, and so you could see him getting kind of emotional about it. And so, and I saw other guys being emotional about it. And I was like, well, guys, we have this season, we can go and win it. You know what I mean? End it like this. And and he said, no, I'm retiring immediately. And I was like, what? Like, immediately? And he was like, and Bill's going to coach the team. And then that's when it kind of hit me personally. And I remember Mac was beside me, and I said to Mac, is he serious? And Mac was like, no, I said, what's wrong with him? Because I'm thinking something is wrong. And Mac was like, Shammond, I don't know, And so that led me to ask him, I said, Coach Smith, are you all right? Is everything okay? And he was okay, because, if something, something health-wise is going on, then you probably be a little bit more understanding of it. But, he said nothing health-wise was going on, but he just felt like that was the right thing to do. And the way that he said it, there was no possible way that you could be upset about it. And so, for me, even though he said that he would be there my 4 years, I didn't feel any issues or had any problems with him choosing to step away at that point. And, I feel like at that time, even more, I needed to be more of a leader and try to do my part to make sure that this basketball team is going to be successful.
Well, Coach, that year Bill Guthridge took over and you went to the Final Four yet again. Tough question here. You went to the Final Four 3 years out of your 4. How tough was it mentally for you knowing that you went 3 years out of your 4, but you never came away with the big prize?
If there was one thing that I could change about my college career, it would be that. It would be that. Because, even for me personally, I wanted to win a national championship. I felt like that would have validated our team at the University of North Carolina. But on a personal note, my senior year, I ended up breaking so many records on a personal note. Not that it was important at the time. Here we're talking about 20 plus years later. And so when I look back and I reflect, and you start looking at some of the things that I was able to accomplish as a player, and then you look at the people that you're there with. When I look at I look at those books and where I place in history, and personally, the things that I was able to achieve at the institution, I started looking, and you have Kenny Smith there, you have the Michael Jordans, you have the Lenny Rosenbluth, you have the Antoine Jameson, the Jerry Stackhouse. I look at that, I said, all those guys were McDonald's All-Americans, and probably all of them were All-State. And you look at Shammond Williams. I wasn't even All-State. I wasn't McDonald's All-American. I was Wendy's, a Wendy's All-American maybe. And what it does for me, even though I wasn't able to win a state championship, I think the one thing that I think cannot be questioned about Shammond Williams at the University of North Carolina, I think I exceeded everybody's expectation. And I got the most out of who Shammond Williams was.
Right.
And that I can be comfortable with.
Right.
And a lot of fans always, they love us. They love us at University of North Carolina, but a lot of fans always say, Shammond, we really appreciate who you are and what you did for the institution and those types of things. And what I think a lot of the fans don't understand about the Carolina family and who Shammond Williams as a person is, I always looked at myself as being like the fans,
right.
That part of the family. I was more like the fans than I really was than the guys that I played with. The majority of the guys that I played with were celebrated players. They were the best of the best where they came from. And for me, I was probably, I was more like the fan having an opportunity to make a mark as opposed to being one of the best having to come and make a mark. And so, that's always resonated with me. That's always been important to me. And I think that's what helps me to this day. I think that's why in college coaching, I've always been a great recruiter. I think that I've always been able to make an impact on kids' lives because, I've been a have-not. If you just look at Shammond Williams and you look at the accolades and things like that, you would know that I had no offers to go to college. I wasn't a celebrated individual. And, I guess, what most people would say, I was self-made with the help of the Lord. I was self-made. And so, with that being said, not winning the national championship is extremely difficult from a team perspective, for sure, because I really felt like we were one of the better teams in the country and one of the better teams to actually be at the University of North Carolina. But unfortunately, things didn't work out that way. And me being a leader, in all actuality, Mr. Lewis, I kind of take responsibility of that. You can't just lead and want to be the leader when things are great. I take responsibility of that as well. And but North Carolina, University of North Carolina, and Coach Smith, and all the Carolina family, have been great to me, and I've been appreciative of it because it's helped change not only my family's background, but it's helped change my community's background as well.
Well, Coach, in 1998, when you graduated from UNC, you were drafted number 34 by the Chicago Bulls. You were traded into the Atlanta Hawks. Now, let me ask you this. As you often refer yourself as the no one, the nobody coming out of high school, like you said, you were not All-State, you were not McDonald's All-American, you weren't on anybody's highly talented recruiting list.
Right.
Go to Fort Union, then you blow up, you go to Carolina, And of course, you play with the likes of the Antoine Jamesons, the Vince Carters of the world, and Jeff McGinnis, and so forth and so on. When you start talking about UNC and the recruiting, everybody's talking about all the 5-star All-Americans. You were not that 5-star All-American. So here you are 4 years later, and your name is being mentioned number 34 in the NBA draft by David Stern. What was it like for you as a player to hear your name?
It was interesting because the NBA process was really, going through that process was really great. And I actually had gotten injured at Chicago in the Chicago pre-draft camp. And at that time, had I not gotten injured, there was a possibility that I could have been called early in the first round. But most people were thinking that I was going to have surgery. And so at that point in time, when I was going, I actually, out of 30 teams, 31 teams at the time, I probably went to 27 teams. And teams weren't working me out. They were having me do a physical to see, because I had a herniated disc at Chicago. And so they were trying to see what have surgery and those types of things. So when the draft came, at that point, Mr. Lewis, everything had become a reality. I knew at that point in time that I was going to be drafted. I just didn't know when. And because of who I am as a person and my thought process, it really didn't matter, because playing in the NBA was never my dream. So it was like, okay, I'm going to get a chance to play in the NBA. I love basketball. I love competing now. Make no mistakes about that. But my life wasn't going to be predicated on me playing in the NBA or not. That's not what I stood for. And so I was going through the process because I understood that, I was considered one of the best guards in the country at this point in time. And so that really felt good, knowing that I had earned the respect of the NBA and people that were making the decisions. But it wasn't going to change the person that I was. And a lot of people tell you, when I got drafted, when my name was called, I was actually playing cards. I really wasn't, I was kind of watching the draft and kind of not, but we were playing cards. And once, my phone rung, I didn't really answer my phone. My phone rung. I didn't answer it. And then, my name was called, with the 34th pick, the Chicago Bulls select Shammond Williams. And when it was said, everybody in the whole place jumped up and started screaming. And everybody, they kind of looked at me, and I was just sitting down in the chair like, all right, we're going to Chicago. And, not trying to say that I wasn't appreciative or, it wasn't, I didn't work hard for it, but my mindset totally went to, okay, I'm going to Chicago. I got something to prove now. That was my mentality. And so my phone rang again, probably 10 minutes later, and my agent was on the phone, and he said to me, Shammond, you're not going to Chicago. You're going to Atlanta. Atlanta actually took that pick for you going to Atlanta, and I think it was Corey Carr, Donnie Boyce, and a future pick going to Chicago for you. And so my NBA career started right then.
Well, Coach, you spent 7 years in the NBA, you spent 6 years in Europe, and then in 2012, you decided to get into college coaching. And your first year
Yes.
of college coaching, you was assistant coach at Furman. And then 3 years later, you were at Tulane for 3 years. And then after
Yes, sir.
Tulane, you spent 1 year at Western Kentucky. So
Yes,
in
sir.
2018, you decided to walk away from the collegiate game. What went into your mindset to do that?
For me, who I am as a person and the things that I've stood for as an individual throughout my lifetime, those things had to line up. And a lot of times, you make choices, you end up being in environments that you maybe, didn't know if that environment was actually conducive for your growth or not. And so at the time, even though I had been a part of a staff that recruited the number 7 class in college basketball because of Mitchell Robinson and Josh Anderson, Mitchell Robinson being the 9th player in the country, McDonald's All-American, Josh Anderson being the 37th ranked player in the country. I had great relationships with those 2 kids, and because I lived in New Orleans, and Mitchell Robinson's my godson, and so having those relationships and being the person that I feel like I try to show I am, those families felt like any environment that I'm in would be beneficial to their children's growth. And so, at that point in time, after being in an environment, I made the choice, this may not be the environment that I need to be in for my growth. And at the time, there were kids from South Carolina that I was heavily recruiting and I had been involved with because, I've always been involved with kids in South Carolina, always, from the Raymond Feltons to the Bryce Johnsons, all those kids. I've always I felt like it was my job. And so at the point in time, there was DJ Burns that was in Rock Hill, Jawan Gary that was in Columbia. You had Tommy Bruner, Khalil, even Patrick Williams that was in Charlotte.
Right.
There was a lot of kids that I was involved with. Zion was here at the time. So there's a lot of kids that I felt like I could make an impact on in the state of South Carolina. So, steady going back to our home in Chapel Hill, we decided to come to our home in South Carolina in Greenville. And so the first year here, I was going to Spartanburg Day, spending time with Zion. I would go down to Columbia with Jawan Gary. I would go to Rock Hill with DJ and Patrick Williams. And, the greatest thing for me is being able to teach and develop. And, all of those kids actually just took off and began to, become better basketball players, but more importantly, they were better people as well, better individuals. And so once I was able to get those guys situated and I decided to start doing it, as a business myself, as a training company, Shammond Williams Basketball Academy.
Now you have 2 businesses. You develop your real estate company, which is in Greenville, and you also have Shammond Williams Basketball Academy. Question here: how do you transition from being the Shammond Williams, the basketball player, to Shammond Williams, the college coach? Now you're Shammond Williams, the business person. Now you're helping young players as far as their development to get to the next level as well.
Well, my whole mentality, my whole life, Mr. Lewis, especially once I went to Fort Union, one of my favorite movies was Trading Places. Some people may remember that movie, but
I remember
one of my favorite movies. And you had Eddie Murphy,
right?
That came from a different socioeconomic background, and he was took in by guys that worked on Wall Street, and he began to learn the trade, and he became influential. But more importantly, he was making enough money that he could take care of business. And so in my whole thought process was, hey, you know what? If I could get to Wall Street, then I can make enough money that I could take care of my family.
Right.
And so that led me. I mean, even before I went to North Carolina, I worked at Lincoln Financial Group in Charlotte. I did an intern there, going into North Carolina. And so my whole mindset was, hey, you know what? If I can get my economics degree, I can go to Wall Street and I can be great on Wall Street. The one thing I wanted to do was 2 things: work on Wall Street and wear suits. And so a lot of people know me to wear suits, but I wanted to work on Wall Street as well. And so my whole mindset, even my college career, most people will tell you that I was business savvy. Everything that I did, even how I operated, carried myself, I was always thinking business. And so even when I developed my real estate company, I was actually still playing in that time. When I developed my real estate company, and I developed my mental health facility, I was still playing. And so, that's one thing that I always try to help kids understand about, basketball to this day, that it's a business. And you can't carry yourself as an athlete. You have to carry yourself as a businessman, because you got to understand that eventually this becomes a business. Right. And when coaches are giving you scholarships to come and attend their institution, that's how they feed their families. So it's a business for them. Right. And so you have to have the same mindset and understand the professionalism that comes with it. And so, I've always had that thought process. So for me to transition out of basketball in that time, to concentrate more on my businesses was beneficial, because now I could be a little bit more hands-on than I had been in the past, where, I was really, I would spend time budgeting in the evening. Sometime after I finished my basketball responsibilities, I would do my budgets. I would make sure things were getting paid on time. I would make sure that everything was operating accordingly, so the business could continue flourishing, because we all know basketball is a means to an end. When you start talking about playing, eventually the game is going to end, voluntarily or involuntarily. And so I always understood that. And so, my thing was to make sure that my preparation was putting me in a position that I could continue flourishing beyond basketball when it finished. Excuse me.
Well, one thing that I've, listened to, you said all throughout your journey is you waited your turn. And
yes, sir.
You have an amazing journey and a story to tell. What lessons can you give young players today that can relate to them on how they can get to the next level?
Well, I would always say make sure that you're putting yourself in a position that you can take advantage of the opportunity once it presents itself. Some people are blessed to get 10 opportunities. Some people are blessed to get 8 opportunities. But you may only be blessed to get 1 opportunity. And so what I'm saying is make sure that everything that you're doing, you're progressing and you're getting better at it. And you're not focusing on the individual that got 10 opportunities. You're focusing on you as a person. So once that opportunity presents itself, you can knock the door down and you can capitalize off of it. I think in today's world, because of the environment of success and everybody, you have social media, so everybody gets to see what everybody else is doing. Everybody's concentrating on what everybody else is doing as opposed to what you are doing.
Right.
You're in control of what you do.
Run your own race.
Run your own race. Exactly. Run your own race, because, you never know what God has in store for you. You never know. And so for me, even in recruiting and even with developing, you never hear me say, well, this kid's going to be this and this kid's not going to be this. Who am I to say that? I would be a hypocrite if I said that, according to who I am and what has happened to me in my life. And so, even when I teach the game, I never try to put kids in boxes. And I always make sure that I try to teach them everything that they need to know that's going to help them become better, that's going to help them compete for the best jobs or the best opportunities, because they're only going to be in your environment for a certain amount of time. And so if what you're teaching and what you're developing is not going to allow them to go out and compete when they leave your environment, then you have to really reassess what you're teaching, because, that's a responsibility that you have as a teacher to make sure, like, my econ professors, their job was to make sure that I understood macro and micro, that when I left that environment, when I tried to compete for jobs on Wall Street, I understood what was going on and I had the aptitude to be competitive. And so I teach no other way. And that's why, a lot of times, for me, I've been blessed in that regard. In the past 4 years, I have 4 NBA players. But a lot of times, like when I started with Mitchell Robinson, people were like, well, why are you working with him on his ball handling? Why are you working with him on his jump shot? And my whole question was, why not? What if I had your child in my first grade class and I said, I'm only going to teach your child A, B, C, D, E, and F. I'm not going to teach them the whole alphabet. I'm just going to teach them that for, and I'm gonna let the second grade develop. You wouldn't like that. You would say, no, teach my kid everything. I want my kid to have the information. So what? They can matriculate. Well, when it comes to the game of basketball as well, I have no different. I have the same understanding and thought process. That's why, you probably hear me say more teacher than coach, because I feel like I am a teacher. I take the responsibility of a teacher because it's my job to make sure you have the information that you can continue matriculating. And so why would I pigeonhole that individual knowing that, hey, you know what? If I teach them, if I can relate to them and I can teach them, then they'll be receptive to learn, which will only make them better. And so, that's my thought process, and that's what I try to do, be it my NBA players or be it my my 6-year-olds. They're all being taught at a high level so they can go and perform and compete at a high level.
Well, Coach, you have an amazing story and journey, and I'm glad we were able to share it with so many people out there today. And for young players in the Greenville area, the upstate of South Carolina, if they have an opportunity to listen to the story of how you, as a high school player, had no Division I offers, but you continued to believe in yourself as a person, as a player. You went to Fort Union, played at UNC, 3 Final Fours, drafted in the NBA. You played in the NBA for 7 years, 6 years in Europe. You're a successful business person, but more importantly, you also have a love and passion for teaching the game of basketball. So for young people out there that's looking for someone in the upstate area to have as a trainer, as a mentor, who can help guide them through the process, you're the guy to call. And I just thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for having me. And I look forward to working with Phenom, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity, because I look forward to it, and I hope that I can help any possible way I can.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Man, you're amazing.
No, I ain't amazing. I'm just who I am, Mr. Lewis.
You know what? Still have the prettiest jumper.
I appreciate it.
We'll be down there Wednesday. We're going to be down there, okay?
All right. Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Coach.
All right. Thank you.